Welcome to Oromia Media Network's English News Report, broadcasting to you live. Today is Thursday, September the 3rd, 2020. I'm one of your English anchors. My name is Surati Sali, with our technician Adil Usman. Today's bulletin is headlined with the following reports. A new style of protest begins in Oromia. Women makes a stand and calls for the end of sexual violations by security forces. Government forces continue to use lethal forces on protesters and innocent civilians. American senators call for the immediate release of Micha Chirri and Jawar Mohammed. Coalition of Interfaith produces a statement to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on the ongoing human rights violation. And now for today's news. Women are flooding the streets in many cities across Oromia, including Awadai, Bardode, and Gandia. Today's protests have expanded throughout other cities of Hararghe, including Machara, Chiro, Dire Dawa, and Dire Tiyara. Photographs emerging of the Oromo protesting showcase slogans seeking peace, clarifying truths of faith unity, and demands for killings to stop. The protests by Oromo women call for the end to sexual violence perpetrated by security forces, the release of all political prisoners, and for police to stop killing peaceful Oromo youth protesters. The protests have been met with brutal responses from government and police forces that include beatings, arrests, and rape. Military forces shot dead several residents of Awadai, including a pregnant woman and a 10-year-old, in the past 2 weeks. Specific reports indicate that Ethiopian military forces arrested dozens of Oromos, including women, in the eastern town of Awadai and took them to a nearby military camp where reports of rape continue to emerge. Women protesting in large numbers without the presence of men represent a new turn in the Oromo protest movement. The current women's movement represents bravery and heroism. That was considered normal in Oromo history. However, since the birth of the Oromo protest movement, the women emerging with their own protest represents a new strategy to speak against the current ruling party and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government abuses. The Oromo women's slogans reflect frustration with the killings of their people and has captivated the Oromo nation and people's hearts around the world. Oromo women around the world have responded to the protests made by women in Oromia. Previously, women's protests have taken place in Europe and the United States. However, since the rise of protests from Oromo women in Oromia, a fresh round of active protests are unfolding. In the capital city of Berlin, Oromo women have rallied to support their female counterparts in Oromia. Slogans include calling for the end of Abiy Ahmed's rule in Ethiopia, solidarity for the women and all imprisoned leaders, activists, and civilians. Footage from today's protests show a determined group of women who stand in support of human rights and women's rights to protest peacefully and without fear in Oromia. It seems the women's movement is taking on a refreshed strength, and today we speak with an Oromo activist based in America's state of Minnesota, where many female protests have famously taken place. Our guest on today's program is Oromo activist Najah Hamza. Najah, welcome to the program. Our news segment has spoken about the rapidly expanding protests in cities such as Hirna and Sirka, Oromia, to the point that women are making their own spontaneous protests. What is happening in Oromia that have made women decide to take a fresh approach to protesting as a women's only march? What are they protesting and what is their significance?
Thanks for having me, Sorati. So the Oromo women's protest happening in Oromia right now is indicative of two things, one of which is the extent to which the Abiy government has hurt our people, imprisoned our people, is making day-to-day life difficult. And that's why these women are out there protesting. They're protesting against violence. They're protesting to free our leaders who are languishing in trumped-up charges, currently in various makeshift prisons, and without charges mostly. And those charges, even if they are present, is not based on any criminality, but more towards just silencing their voices. And then there are widespread talk about Abiy military raping our women all over Oromia. So they're protesting for themselves, they're protesting for their nation and their leader, and to just live in peace. Generally, that's the theme that I have witnessed all across those areas that are protesting right now.
Okay. Over the past couple of weeks, we learned that a lot of the Oromo detainees in churches and schools are at high risk of contracting COVID-19. Recently, we've learned that security forces have arrested and are holding our women in military camps. Along with the rising cases of COVID-19, do we have any updates on their well-being? Are families able to visit and speak with their loved ones?
So that's another thing. The recklessness of the Abiy government in Ethiopia in the current situation that the world is facing, which is a pandemic, in a pandemic that we're even taking every precaution and even not beating, in the West and elsewhere with all the health facilities and resources that we have. As a third world country, Ethiopia decided to go the other way. He is imprisoning people in a very overcrowded, non-sanitary places, and women are now being added to that list. So not only this is an egregious, assault on human rights, but it is the usage of COVID as an actual political weapon, because I don't think they're trying to prevent this from happening. We have seen cases like the Janet Tafa and a bunch of others who are not really visible, in the political sphere, who have contracted these disease while incarcerated. One of those high-profile cases is Yasin Juma, a Kenyan journalist that was, taken into custody for 50-something days in a charge that has nothing to do with anything, really. And at the end, they even said that there was just some misunderstanding, that there was nothing that he was, involved in. So if we look at it from a health perspective, it is reckless for a government to put people in overcrowded cells and places and things that are not even ready for housing an inmate. Like schools, for example, they don't have facilities, they don't have access to lawyers, they don't allow visitors to bring them clothes and food and, just a simple sanitation of keeping themselves, healthy while, being held against basically illegally. So I think they know the, harmful effect of COVID, because they talk about it in the other side of the government, like trying to say they are trying to keep Ethiopia safe, they're trying to minimize the risk, while at the same time, imprisoning thousands of Oromos and others who are, speaking against the government in such manner that makes it possible for the contraction and spread of COVID-19, and on top of that, use COVID-19 as a political weapon to kind of get rid of people. Plain and simple.
Correct. We are now witnessing government officials in the Oromia region have now decided to kidnap our young girls, just like how you've mentioned. The women-led march is now slowly spreading nationwide. As women here in the diaspora, we reassure one another that we are here to support one another. In which ways can we stand by and help our women on the front lines back home?
So, I am excited for Oromo movement, and the Oromo woman voice in this movement for the first time have stepped up both in diaspora and at home to take hold of this struggle and to bring it home. That's not to say that our involvement was minimal. It was just not celebrated or visible at first. And now you see this, the coming of Oromo woman into the front and driving this struggle home. With that, there is, of course, worries of danger, putting their lives and their bodies and their families' lives in danger. But what this woman, from which some of which I spoke to, have told me is that they have gotten to the point where they're willing to sacrifice their very selves to bring some sort of normalcy into their lives, into their families' lives, and into the country that they love. That's Oromia. And so with that, the Oromo women in the diaspora, we are thinking and talking about how to better support our sisters on the ground. We are here to amplify their voices. We are here to stand for them and to let the world know about what they are doing on the ground, so that their voices are magnified, and is somewhat equal to the sacrifices that they are giving to us as people. And so my worry as a woman is that when you are taken to a military camp or an undisclosed location by a military who has no chain of command, no responsibility whatsoever, we all know what can happen in that environment, and it has happened, and they have been protesting about that. There have been history, like stories of rape and of misconduct when it comes to this military, and this time is not going to be any different. In fact, they will use this as a mandate to kind of hunt this woman down and do as they wish. So we have to be very, very careful how we're going to tell their narrative, keeping their dignity and who they are, but also being a voice for them, so that what they are doing is heard, and that it's validated, and that at the end of the day, we want this government gone. We want our country to return to normalcy and peace, and we want our rights to be respected as people.
After the death of Hachalu Hundessa, we've witnessed the immediate violence against innocent civilians and protesters, the unlawful imprisonment of leaders and civilians, illegal military command posts being in place, and now sexual violence against women. What does this entail about the Prime Minister and his regime? And what do you have to say to the Prime Minister, if you could?
So the whole orchestrated bit of the assassination of Hachalu Hundessa on that fateful day, it triggered a chain of reaction that was designed to crack down on Oromo nationalism, to quell the Oromo question, and to kind of bring back that revisionist nostalgic Ethiopia that he dreams of. And we are here to say that isn't going to happen over our dead body. But he's not trying to paint a country that encompasses all of, its people, Oromo included, but all of the nations and nationalities that live in that country. When he came to power, as a fruit of our struggle, right? We wanted a country that was inclusive. We wanted a country that can offer better future for all of its people. But Abiy administration and his followers are not about that. They want a unitary system. And for that to happen, Oromo people and Oromo nationalism, they see that as a threat. And they want to quell that. So that's basically what was happening since the assassination of Hachalu Hundessa. And on the other side, in our camp, of course, we're resisting this, not only for us, but for all of the people in that country who want to see a better future, who want to see a country that is peaceful, that is inclusive, that celebrates diversity, that allows people to live on their lands and, in their respective communities and regions, administering to themselves in peace. And that's basically, it boils down to those two ideas. The future of Ethiopia, what does it look like, and who should be the winner in that battle? And I say that people always win. And so the people who are advocating for federalism and for the right to self-govern, for the right to live in peace and dignity, for the right to have, your culture, your identity, your language respected in your own areas, and to make it be about national identity together with its diverse and complexity that it offers, is that one camp. And the other camp is basically fighting to restore a supremacy that they have been, privileged and from in the last 150 years. So basically, those are the two things that is at each other right now. And at the end of the day, dreams and goals is one thing, but people will not take this lying down, and it will not be something that can bring that country forward. It's not a forward-thinking agenda. It's a reverting thing. It's going back to the past that has failed that country, that has made Ethiopia the poorest nation on earth, and then it it did not do anything about cultivating identity or cultural heritage of that country as well. So that's where we are when it boils down to it.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me, Najat. I hope to hear from you soon in the many videos to come. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, and so for Oromo women in the diaspora, this is a moment that is upon us, and I know we don't disappoint, but we want to stand shoulder to shoulder to say to our sisters in Oromia, those who are joining the process, protest as day to day, and also those who are planning to join in the coming days and weeks. We are here. You put your bodies and your safety in place for us, and we're here to say we will support you in every possible way we can, be of support and voice to you. And so they should be prepared to come up with ideas and ways in which we can do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Najat.
Thank you for having me, sir.
In the town of Awadai, located in East Hararghe zone, government security forces killed 2 young men, sources have reported to OMN. The security forces accused the 2 Oromo youth of coordinating a market boycott in Awadai town, a peaceful struggle strategy imposed by Kero, Oromo youth around the Oromia state. One of the victims was shot dead by bullet while the other was stabbed to death. The security forces threw bodies of victims around the outskirts of the town. A large number of security forces are occupying the Awadai town, terrorizing residents according to local reports from Awadai. Sources also reported that several people are seriously beaten up daily by security forces. In concerning news, government security forces reportedly raped 3 women last Wednesday night in the town of Awadai. The women are married, but their husbands were not at home when the security forces raided their houses, took them out of their homes, and raped them forcefully. Residents from Awadai report occupying government forces are making life extremely difficult for their citizens. Oromia Media Network journalist Mohammed Siraj and Guyo Wario released on bail. Oromia Media Network's journalists, including Guyo Wario, who famously conducted the last interview before assassinated icon Hachalu Hundessa, has been released from Ethiopian prisons. Journalists' arrest in the context of the Ethiopian ruling party's decision to close down the Oromia Media Network's headquarters in Finfinne indicates stifling of free media and freedom of speech. U.S. initiates partial halt to foreign assistance in Ethiopia. The U.S. State Secretary Mike Pompeo approved a plan to halt U.S. foreign assistance to Ethiopia. More than $130 million of funding is expected to be cut in the U.S. administration's attempt to address Ethiopia's tense relations with Egypt and Sudan. U.S. funding cuts reflect Abiy Ahmed's struggle to maintain relations with the people inside his own country and neighboring country leaders. Currently, Ethiopia's flared relations with Egypt and Sudan stem from Abiy Ahmed's decision to construct a water dam on the Nile River known as the GERD, Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Neighboring countries, including Egypt and Sudan, rely on the Nile River for drinking water and agriculture. They demand Abiy Ahmed refrain from filling 74 billion cubic meter of water in the GERD until creation of a legally binding deal to address water management flows in dry seasons, establishment of dispute resolution mechanism between all countries. These financial cuts were announced during U.S. visits to Sudan last week and will no doubt test U.S.-Ethio tensions. Some Ethiopian officials complain the U.S. is taking Egypt's side in the dispute. On the same day as the U.S. Secretary of State's visit to Khartoum, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed also attended Khartoum on the same day. Plans to issue funding cuts to Ethiopia have been approved in the areas of security assistance, counterterrorism and military education, training, anti-human trafficking programs, and broader development assistance funding. U.S. aides also confirmed the anticipated hundreds of millions of dollars of cuts will not affect emergency humanitarian relief, food assistance, or health programs aimed at addressing COVID-19 or HIV/AIDS. Notably, U.S. Secretary also released remarks during his visits to Sudan stating all free nations must work together to confront authoritarian threats. American senators call for the immediate release of Misha Chirri and Jawar Mohammed. American Senators Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith from the state of Minnesota call for the immediate release of detainees in Ethiopia amid unrest. Jawar Mohammed and other prominent Oromo political leaders were jailed one day following the murder of Oromo iconic artist Hachalu Hundesa on June 29, 2020. Jawar Mohammed, Misha Chirri, and other Oromo political leaders, activists, and journalists were thrown in jail on what is widely viewed as a trumped-up charge of conspiring to kill Ethiopian government's Prosperity Party members and inciting violence in Ethiopia. Critics are supportive of the American senators' public advocacy for Jawar and Misha. They state that all unlawful arrested persons have been jailed for no other reason than participating in Ethiopia's reform, using their democratic rights, and for being Oromo. Around the world, the Oromo protest movement continues to gain momentum. Ethiopian embassies in Western countries are engulfed by protesters demanding accountability by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's ruling party. Rallies in front of the Ethiopian embassy in Berlin, London, Amsterdam, Washington, D.C., and the organized sit-ins at the Ethiopian embassy in Minnesota reflects rallies around the world that have taken place since Hachalu Hundesa's murder. Participants attending protest rallies against Ethiopia's retreat from reform, as evidenced by the current detention and mistreatment of opposition leader Bekele Garba, Jawar Mohammed, and other political opposition leaders and Oromo civilians. Protesters cite wide violence by government forces against Oromo people and other Ethiopian nationalities. The Alberta Oromo Interfaith community produced a joint statement on the ongoing human rights violation, arbitrary arrests, and killings in Oromia and other parts of Ethiopia. The letter, directed to the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, encourages all religious leaders in Ethiopia to use their international connections and moral authority to publicize the complicity of Ethiopian government policies with the atrocities of the racial segregation, specifically on Oromo people. The Interfaith community quotes Article 19 from the Ethiopian Constitution, which states, "Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers." The coalition of Interfaith continues by stating, "We believe that it is only through discussion, reconciliation, and negotiation that we can bring sustainable peace and build a democracy here in Ethiopia that will treat all people equally, regardless of their ethnicity or beliefs." African migrants detained in Saudi Arabian prisons. Hundreds, if not thousands, of African migrants are being locked up by Saudi authorities in deplorable conditions in a reported drive to stop the spread of COVID-19. Investigations entail graphic photos of migrants being held in detention centers, many malnourished, crippled by the heat, and windows closed off while being tightly packed in small rooms. Furthermore, dozens of detainees face life-threatening conditions after reportedly lacking access to food and water. The article published by the Sunday Telegraph presents a photo of a corpse encased in a purple and white blanket. The body belongs to a migrant who had died from heat stroke. Another young man was found hanged after losing hope, his friend said. After being shown the images by the Sunday Telegraph, Adam Kugel, Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch in the Middle East, said, "Photos emerging from detention centers in southern Saudi Arabia show the authorities there are subjecting Horn of Africa migrants to squalor, crowded, and dehumanizing conditions with no regard for their safety or dignity." Over the last decade, many young Ethiopians have made their way to the Gulf state, often with the help of Saudi recruitment agents and people traffickers in a bid to escape poverty in Ethiopia. The graphic images and detainee testimonies have sparked outrage among human rights activists and have particular renaissance in light of the global Black Lives Matter protest. That's all the news for now. An English news broadcast will return to you live on Oromia Media Network. But right now, stay tuned for further broadcasts on OMN. Until we meet again, my name is Sorati Sali. Take care, stay safe, and goodbye.